Hello and welcome to my creative castle. No, it's not Whip Wednesday. It's not even Not Your Therapist Thursday. But guess what? I'm still knitting the granita tank top. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and knit and chat with y'all a little bit, right? Still, even though it's not Whip Wednesday, still get your beverage, get your project, come on in, hang out with me, spend a little bit of your day with me. Let me know what you're working on today. What are you crafting on? Are you knitting? Are you crocheting? Are you doing some embroidery? Are you just cleaning up your kitchen? What are we doing, right? I'd love to know. So, if you saw my Not Your Therapist Thursday, I did ask you, like, how do you feel about seeing the same whip multiple times, right, in videos? Like, sometimes I only work on a whip once for Whip Wednesday, and then you'll see it again, like maybe on a Finish It Friday, and you might see it again in a yarn review or something, but you really only see me working on it once. Well, how do you feel about seeing a whip more than once? Does it bother you? I guess it depends on what you're here for, right? As I talked about in the Not Your Therapist Thursday video, some people are at home a lot due to all of those circumstances that I talked about. And so, they're just looking for a crafting buddy, a crafting companion, a crafting support, right? So, if that's you, then you probably don't really care what I'm whipping on too much, but maybe you do. I don't know. So, but I also know that there are people who are working and living busy lives. And so, for you, you might be here for very different reasons. You're looking for new projects, right? Like you're looking at different channels to see things like Finish It Fridays, and you're looking at Whip Wednesdays just to see like what are people working on, what's out there, what might you find interesting, right? I love that about the internet. We can discover new patterns. I've discovered a lot of patterns on other people's YouTube channels. So, if you for some reason you missed those two videos, the Whip Wednesday and the Not Your Therapist Thursday, well, this is Knit in Comfy Fingering from Knit Picks and We Crochet. And if you're colorblind like me, the color is blackberry. And yes, if you're new to my channel, hi, my name's May. I love yarn. I love to knit and crochet. Those are my hobbies. And I also happen to have been born visually impaired, legally blind, and completely colorblind. And I happen to believe that knitting and crocheting can be done tactily. They're for everybody. So I, of course, want to encourage other visually impaired people to knit and crochet, right? So you're probably sitting there thinking like, what are we doing here on July 22nd on a Tuesday in the middle of sock week of all things, and she's still knitting the granita tank top, right? Yeah. Well, you won't see it again, I don't think, as a whip. You'll see it on a Finish It Friday as a finished object, and we'll discuss it a little bit. But I'm almost finished with the stockinette portion here. Got just a few more rounds to go, and then I'll be at the lace portion. So, but I was wanting a project to, that I could just chat with you about, because I wanted to share with you a little bit that, the day, July 22nd, right? That happens to fall on a Tuesday this year. But that's a really special anniversary in my life, and I thought I'd just share that with y'all, talk with you a little bit about it. And not only is it a special anniversary, but this year in 2025, it's really hard for me to believe that it's the 30th anniversary. Yeah, what, right? 1995. What were you all doing in 1995? So I am 47, I've said that before. So I was 17 years old, and I was graduating. I was standing on the stage in San Rafael, California on a beautiful sunny summer day, graduating with my very first beautiful, beautiful German Shepherd guide dog from Guide Dogs for the Blind. Oh yes, Genevieve she was a petite little female. She was just a traditional black and tan saddleback, right? Just what you picture, you know. She had the black back and then the tan legs, and she had the classical black mask. Just a beautiful, beautiful German Shepherd. And if you want to know more about my 3 guide dogs, yes, I've had 3 German Shepherd guide dogs. I have a whole video on my channel called Meet My 3 Guide Dogs, where you can learn all about them. So, but in this video, I just wanted to focus on, you know, the day that the 2 of us completed our training together, the day that we graduated together. Such a momentous day in my life, because you know, I had no idea at the time that I got her how much she would change my life, and that all 3 of my guide dogs would change my life. How much freedom they'd give me, how much independence they'd give me, how much confidence they'd give me, you know, feeling comfortable, you know, to really be ready to, you know, be out in the world and go to college and move away from home and live in my own home, right? Those kinds of things. And of course, most people at 17 are thinking about, right? At 17, most of us here in the United States, right? I was just finished my my junior year of high school. I was in between my junior and my senior year of high school. And, you know, most of my friends were learning how to drive, right? They were getting cars, they were getting their driver's license, they were getting their independence, they were getting their keys to independence, their keys to freedom to go and, you know, really travel about the world, right? Go to work, go to school, travel about the world really independently on their way to adulthood. And, you know, as somebody, I was born legally blind, right? We pretty much knew my whole life I was never going to have a legal driver's license. Have I driven? Sure, I've driven. I have. I even know how to drive a stick shift. Yeah, I'm that old. But some of you are like, what's a stick shift? Yeah, that's okay. It's all right. But anyways, you know, but we pretty much knew my whole life that I was going to be too blind to drive, right? That wasn't, you know, that wasn't something that my parents really even thought that was going to be a possibility for me. So, but we didn't know that I would have a guide dog, right? I didn't even get a white cane until I was 10. We knew I was legally blind, but not totally blind, like I say on this channel. I'm not totally blind. And so I live in this really strange place that a lot of people don't understand. I call it the, you know, living in between the worlds of the sighted and the blind, right? So it's a difficult place because, you know, people don't look at you as sighted, but they don't look at you as blind either. And so they don't know what to do with you. And, you know, you don't really know either. You don't fit in with either. And so, you know, I didn't know that I was even going to be able to have a guide dog until I was about 16. And so I do talk about that in the video on Meet My 3 Guide Dogs. I talk about that fact that a lot of people don't know that you don't have to be totally blind to get a guide dog, just legally blind, right? So, you know, when I got Genevieve, it was so liberating. Yes, I had my white cane, and I had pretty good cane skills. I did. But I have a video on my channel that I posted, I think a couple of weeks ago now, and it's called Walk and Talk at My Parents' House or My Childhood Neighborhood or something like that. So if you're curious, you know, to see what it's like to walk around with a white cane, I just happened to have been out there too for, you know, garbage day. And so there's trash cans everywhere, which I'm encountering with my white cane, right? You tap them and you run into them with your cane. And that, you know, was my whole life with my white cane, is that you run into objects with your cane. And that's how a cane works, is you make contact, you know, with the object, and that's how you know it's there, right? Your cane is just out there. It's like an extension of you. You make contact with that object, and then you know it's there, and then you have to figure out, you know, is there space for me to get around this thing? Which way? Where do I go? Well, once I got a guide dog, I didn't run in to garbage cans anymore. I could completely forget and not even know, right, that it was garbage day, because I wouldn't bump into a single garbage can sometimes. Occasionally there are people who put their garbage cans in the very middle of the sidewalk, and then of course my dog would have to show me that, right? And we'd have to learn how to navigate. We'd have to figure out, can we go around it? Which side? Where is it safe? All of that. But when I got her, I was just amazed. Now, I don't have a guide dog now for a whole variety of reasons that I'm not going to get into right now. But they, for me, were just, a whole change in my mobility and my travel and my ability to get around, navigate the world. They for me at the time were exactly what I needed to really feel like I was going to have as close of a, parallel experience to my sighted classmates. Obviously walking with a guide dog, it's a lot slower, right, than driving your car, okay? But still, people felt, my parents felt safe. All of a sudden, I'd be walking home from school, walking home from high school, and it was miles. It wasn't like just, it was several miles for me to walk home from high school, all the way through town. We had pretty much only the one high school, in our small town that we grew up in. There was something called like alternative school or something like that, for kids who couldn't, get through the regular structured school program. But we didn't have at the time a second like high school. There was only the one option. And so it was, it was several miles. I think probably 3 or 4 miles from where my parents lived. And so once I came home with my guide dog, on July 22nd, we started walking around the neighborhood, walking around town. And by the time I was finishing, I was starting my senior year, she and I were able to walk that walk home just fine together. And prior to having a guide dog, I don't know if I would have tried to make that whole walk by myself or not all the way through town. I did grow up in that town for the most part, but for me, Genevieve represented, like, I would call her like my wings. I mean, Genevieve was like my wings, okay? People got their cars, their driver's license. She was like my keys to freedom, my keys to independence. She was like my wings. I felt like, for the first time, I really felt like I was, soaring and traveling smoothly and gracefully and able to just, move about the environment without bumping into stuff, right? Without crashing my cane into stuff. And for me, that kind of smooth travel. No, I'm a comfortable cane traveler now. I am. Like, I can travel with my cane and feel more relaxed and more comfortable and more natural with it. But when I was a teenager, a cane didn't feel super natural or comfortable to me. And, to me, it's always, when you're walking with a cane, you're always going to be a little bit rigid because you're going to, crash into stuff or get it stuck in a crack in the sidewalk or something like that. So there's always going to be that sort of where you're always feeling like you got to brace your body, right, to react to something, running into something. Where with a guide dog, those things just don't happen. So she all of a sudden gave me, an independence and ability to travel just so smoothly, not run into stuff. I walked faster. Genevieve was the slowest of my 3 guide dogs, okay? The longer that I spent walking with guide dogs, the faster I got at walking. And so my dogs got progressively faster like that. And that just blows my mind now to think about that, my second guide dog, Albie, was even faster than Genevieve. And my third guide dog, Rosie, was even faster than him. But yet when I got Genevieve, she seemed really fast, right? Because I didn't walk that fast with my white cane. So to me, I was like, wow, we are flying. We are soaring down the sidewalk. We're not bumping into anything. Like, travel so smooth. I feel confident. I feel like I don't have to be just focused, on every single thing. Like what my cane's going to encounter, what's going on in front of me. And so travel with her was just I felt, I mean, I always knew, my family didn't doubt that I was going to go to college, okay? They never were like, well, we don't know if May's going to go to college or not because she's, legally blind. Like, that was never a thought in our family. We always knew that I was going to go to college. But I still was like, well, okay, I'm gonna do it with my white cane, I guess, and figure it out. And once I had her, I for sure knew that I could. I knew I could move out of my parents' house. I was really ready for it. I was, but I for sure knew when I had her that I could go. I had the confidence then to go, into completely, unknown environments, and knew. To me, one of the greatest things that I tell people about having a guide dog is, even when you get lost, right? When you can't see and you get lost, you're not alone. You're not. Your dog is with you. I mean, obviously they can't, read you the street signs or anything like that, but they're always with you and you're not alone. And that was such a sweet and wonderful thing about them. So for me, I felt as a 17-year-old, at that point, I still didn't know. When I graduated with her at 17 in July, in 1995, I still wasn't sure where I was gonna go to college at. I didn't know if I was gonna go, to the local community college. Was I gonna move a few miles or a few, like 100 miles east and go to that university? Was I going to go west over by the Seattle area and go, so I definitely was still checking out. I was pretty sure I wanted to go to college in state in Washington State, just because it was a lot more affordable, right? In-state tuition was a lot more affordable, but I didn't know yet, am I going to go to community college or am I going to go to a big university? I wasn't sure. So for me, I knew once I had her, yeah, I'm totally comfortable, going to a university. That would be great. I could move out of my parents' house and, in all that, and do the things that people do when they go to college. And interestingly, I ended up choosing to go to the local community college and live at home with my parents. And I felt it was a, better environment for Genevieve for a whole variety of reasons. But she definitely gave me that confidence and I had practiced riding this, the bus before. Riding the bus, I learned that when I was 10 in school with my orientation and mobility trainer. We can talk about that in another video. So I wasn't new to taking the bus. I could do it with my white cane, and I do it. I did it when I worked at the university. I took my white cane after my last guide dog passed away. I chose not to get another one. It was just too painful to even think about it at the time. And now where I live, right, I don't go anywhere. I don't work anymore, and so I don't have a need for a guide dog pretty much anymore. But in my college days, it was so liberating. I don't know if I can even explain it to people who haven't had a guide dog before. But that's partially why I'm talking about it here today, because I do feel like there's a lot, there's a lot that people don't know about guide dogs, right? And I know that because I used to do a lot of public presentations for all kinds of groups. I did public presentations to like anywhere from preschool all the way to high school, to kids classes at church, Sunday school, Rotary Club presentations, and Seroptimus clubs. The Humane Society, where our town was, they had me out to be their speaker at their annual fundraiser. So many different organizations and groups have had me as a guest speaker for different events. And my guide dogs were there with me for a lot of them. And that was, the most question that people wanted to ask about was the guide dog. I did presentations on, just disability, life with a visual impairment, with a disability. And people, of course, had questions about all kinds of things, which is fine. That's why I did those presentations, was for education, right? It's good to learn. It's really, really good to learn, especially about, things that we might be ignorant of. It's okay to be ignorant of things. I'm ignorant of a lot of things. But it's good to learn, right? We should seek out opportunities to learn. And so that's partially why I'm here on YouTube, for many reasons, to help people to learn about visual impairments, right? Since I'm not doing those public presentations anymore and educating people about visual impairments, I was like, why not do that on YouTube some, right? Take advantage of opportunities to talk to people, because people were always asking me to do presentations and they had so many questions about my guide dogs. So, if you have a question about guide dogs, please feel free to leave it in the comment section. If you have any questions or things that you've seen or things that you've wondered, it's okay to ask, right? It's okay to ask, and I'll do my best to answer it for you. Now, like I said, I don't have a guide dog anymore. I haven't had one since, sorry, I am so itchy. I've talked about that before. My nose itches so much sometimes, one of my allergies. I don't know what's up with that. But anyways, excuse me. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, about guide dogs, right? Because that's what people always wanted to ask about. And so I haven't had a guide dog since 2012, if you're wondering about that. And so it's been 13 years since I've had one. But so things in some ways in the training area have changed for sure with guide dog training, since I haven't been in a training program for a while. But I can still certainly share with you, that I had guide dogs for 17 years at my side throughout all of my 10 years, my senior year of high school, right? It was so, Genevieve really started me on a journey that it was just amazing, right? Everything, when we traveled, I was like, wow, we were like a team, like a guide dog for me personally, right? She was my partner. She was like my life partner. She was like my eyes, right? She was like a dog. If you have a pet or a dog, you know how much you love them. You know how much you enjoy their companionship. And then think about having them with you like 24 hours a day, and that they help you to navigate the world safely. So she was my pet. She was my eyes. She was like my partner in crime. She was like my best friend in life, right? We did everything together. And I took my guide dogs everywhere. My guide dogs, they went to college with me. They went to work with me. They rode the buses with me. They traveled on vacations. They hiked with me. My dogs went on dates with me. They went on, all kinds of fun play. They went to the movies. They went to concerts. They went to plays. They, book readings, traveling, like touristy type things. They did all those things, right? My dogs have been on all kinds of modes of transportation, and they were great at it, right? They were good workers. And so, Genevieve was really like, she was the beginning. She was like the first step into that independence and the confidence and the travel that I needed as a young adult, right? To go into the world. I wasn't alone. So when I moved out of my parents' house when I was 20 to, finish college at a university in another town. And I was definitely ready to not just move out, but to actually have my own house and not even live in a dorm, not even live on campus. I was like, no, Genevieve wants a house and a yard to, chase her ball in and be a dog in. And so, but I just had no fear of living alone, and thankfully my parents had raised me to where I could certainly manage a household independently at 20, right? I knew how to cook and do my laundry and wash the dishes and vacuum and, grocery shop. I knew how to manage life, but the only thing that I couldn't do was, it did have a lawn, was mow the lawn, right? We did have to hire somebody to mow the lawn. So, there were a few things about living independently that I didn't do. But for the most part, I really felt, because my parents had prepared me and because I had Genevieve, we lived about 10 blocks from campus. And so she and I were able to do that. We were able to do that, walk together at school. But even just in my high school days, it was like, I'd gone to that high school, when the days when I was in high school, when I got Genevieve, We got back in July, and then we had about a month off. We graduated on July 22nd, flew home. I traveled with her, by the way. I trained with her down in San Rafael. I think I said that at the beginning, San Rafael, California, at the campus of Guide Dogs for the Blind, down in San Rafael, and they train guide dogs. So they don't train German Shepherds anymore. They don't. If you're wondering and you're looking at them and you're thinking like, they don't have German Shepherds. They don't. Yeah. So if I did ever get another guide dog, probably wouldn't go back to them, because that's, that's what I had, and that's what I loved, and that's what I know. But that's just me. By no means am I saying, that's, the best breed. A lot of people get really offended by that. No, the majority of guide dogs are retrievers. They're Labrador retrievers. They're golden retrievers. There's some kind of cross of the two, right? So the majority of guide dogs are some type of retriever, and that's what Guide Dogs for the Blind is choosing to do, is just have retrievers. So that's not really for me, but they are nice dogs. They're really, really nice dogs. They're sweet dogs. They're wonderful dogs. They're obviously good workers, right? Because that's what they're using, but they don't use them anymore. But that is where I graduated, and at the time that I went into training, we were there for 4 weeks. Yeah, we had to live. They trained in a dorm. Now, not all guide dog schools, the majority in the United States are actual schools, like they're training centers, like a campus, right? Like a dormitory type setting. And you go to them and you spend anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, living at like this dormitory setting, right, where you have a dorm and you have a dining room and you eat your meals there, and you actually train there with the dog and their trainer. Like most of the facilities that train, like the Seeing Eye in New Jersey is probably the most well known, and the first guide dog training school here in the United States is called the Seeing Eye in New Jersey, and that's where the term Seeing Eye Dog came from. Now, of course, that's a trademark term of the Seeing Eye, so because my dogs didn't come from them, technically they were not Seeing Eye dogs. However, that's kind of the generic term that people know. So sometimes I'll say Seeing Eye Dog, because that's the language, right? That's the terminology that people know. But technically, because my dogs didn't come from their program, I call them a guide dog, which is like the generic term, no matter where you got your dog from, or if you home trained it or got it through a private trainer or an agency or whatever, the dog is trained to guide somebody who's visually impaired, who's blind or visually impaired. So, but there's lots of other training centers in the United States. There's Guiding Eyes for the Blind in New York. There's Southeastern Guide Dogs in Florida. Guide Dogs of the Deserts, also in California. There's Leader Dogs for the Blind in Michigan. So there's a lot of other training centers, and there is one called Fidelco Guide Dogs, which does only German Shepherds in Connecticut. And they do in-residence training, right? Where they come to your house and they train you at your home residence. And more training programs are doing that. So, if you're interested in this topic at all, like I said, I encourage you to ask questions, but I also encourage you, if you're looking, maybe you have a family member or a parent or somebody that you know who is legally blind. You don't have to be legally blind. You can help them look up these different facilities, right, and help them to choose which one is the best for them. Okay, like, I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons I chose Guide Dogs for the Blind was because I was 16, right? I was a high school student, and a lot of the schools, training centers, would not put a guide dog in a high school. They just won't do it, and that's not it's not usually because the visually impaired person isn't ready for it. It's usually because they're very worried about the school and the other students, right? How are they going to respond? Like when I got my guide dog, it's pretty typical for a staff member, a trainer for a guide dog program, to actually come and visit you. If you apply for a guide dog, a trainer will come and visit you at your home or at your work, somewhere where they can get to know you personally. They can walk around your neighborhood with you. They can learn your pace and how fast you walk, what your environment is, right? Like, is it really busy? Do you live in a tiny apartment? Is it urban? Is it noisy and crowded? Are you taking the subway? My parents' neighborhood, if you saw that video, it's pretty suburban. It's residential, and it's just kind of these sweeping corners, and it's houses, and there's dead end cul-de-sacs on each end, and then we walked up to the park, and I'd take the bus from there. So they wanted to get a feel for my neighborhood, like what was the dog going to be at. But then as a high school student, they said, we actually have to come back and visit your high school. Before we can approve you, we really need to visit your high school. We're actually going to have a meeting with one of the administrators. So they met with the vice principal. They met with the vice principal and me. We had to have a meeting, like with some staff people and administrative staff from the school district with the trainer, and they had to go in and talk to them. They wanted to walk around the high school with me. They wanted to see, what the hallways were like, sort of what it was like, what it was going to be realistic for a dog, what were the students like, and then talk to the administrative staff and say, are you all supportive of have you ever had a guide dog in your school before or not? Are you supportive of the idea of having a guide dog in your school? Do you understand the rules, right? You can't feed the dog. You can't pet the dog. Are you going to help me enforce those rules, right? And make sure that we educate the students, right? We had to educate the other students on, you can't pet the dog. You can't feed the dog. All of that kind of stuff. They had to sort of have a conversation with the vice principal, and he was very supportive. And he was very, very, in fact, he was a dog lover, a dog owner. I think he had a yellow lab at home, and so he was like, no, I really want you to get a yellow lab, right? He really wanted me to get a dog, just like his beloved dog at home. So he was excited about the idea of having a guide dog at school. And so, but that's something that they did, was they made sure that my school, right, the staff members and the administrators were going to be supportive, that they were educated, first of all, that they were educated themselves about the rules of having a guide dog around, and that they would, encourage, they'd educate and they would support me if I was having issues, like with other students or something, that they were going to be there. And so, and they were, and so, but that was necessary for me as a high school student, right, before Guide Dogs for the Blind was going to say, for sure, yes, we will provide you with a dog. They wanted to make sure that the high school was going to be okay with that. And so that's something that I had to, that was sort of like an extra step, right, that I had to do. As a, I was 16, 17. I applied to get a guide dog when I was 16. And so, it was the summer when I was 17 that I went. And so, for them, it was like, let's make sure that this person's going to have to be successful, right? They want us to be a successful team. And so that's what they felt like they needed to do to ensure, right, that my guide dog and I were had the greatest opportunity to be successful. And we were, but it was so cool to me to be able to navigate my high school halls, right, with a guide dog. I just felt like there was just no more, bumping into other students anymore. And I didn't always use my white cane in high school, just, because it was more about students tripping over it, and so sometimes I would walk around without it, sometimes with it. But there was no more of that. There was no more students tripping over it or anything like that. There was no more of me like accidentally hitting somebody with my cane and, any of that kind of stuff and running into stuff. That's awkward when you're like a teenager, right? So she gave me that to just like travel, and she would just weave in and out of the crowd in the high school. I mean, she was so much more smooth. I had felt, in the crowded halls of a high school, like I felt clumsy, right, with my white cane and bumping into stuff. And she would just like negotiate those crowds and bob and weave and get me around people, And so it was a total game changer for me in terms of navigating really crowded hallways in high school, right? You're trying to get from one class to the next in 10 minutes or something. And she was a game changer for me. Plus, my high school was under construction my senior year. Yeah. So she changed up everything for me in my life. And so Genevieve, that day is really special to me because it was like, okay, we finished up our training. I had to do 4 weeks. At that time, I had to spend 4 weeks in this residential dorm in California. And now most training programs are anywhere from 2 to 3, sometimes up to 4 weeks, depending on where you go. So it just depends on the program. But at that time, I had to be there for 4 weeks, away from my family. I'd never before been away from my family for 4 weeks as a 17-year-old. I'd never lived that way, that long out of my parents' household. So, and then plus I was living in a dorm for the first time. And I was living, well, not for the first time, but for the first time for that long, right? I lived in I got to summer camp and had time at the school for the blind the year before, that kind of thing. But for the first time for that long of a time period with strangers, complete strangers from all over the U.S. and Canada. We had 3 people from Canada who were in my class. And people from everywhere, from San Diego, California, all the way to Georgia. So, it was a really new, all of it was just like a whole new experience for me. And even though they tried to prepare us, right, for our first guide dog experience, nothing can quite compare you, can prepare you for it, in my opinion. As much, you can read all you want, you can talk to other people, other people with guide dogs, which I certainly did, but it's like nothing's going to quite prepare you for that first time that you pick up that harness handle, right, and you walk with that guide dog and you experience that kind of travel. Nothing's quite like it. And so, there's definitely pros and cons of guide dog travel versus cane travel, which I'm not even going to get into tonight because I think this has been kind of long, probably, right? So I'll probably go as soon as I finish this round, which I'm almost done with. But I just wanted to come on here tonight and share with all of you why July 22nd is such a special day, especially now. 30 years. What? I can't believe it's been 30 years. I don't know how time passed that quickly. But 30 years since I graduated with my first guide dog. And it really changed my life. That was such a significant day for me. Changed my life in so many ways. She was my wings. I flew down the street. I felt like I was flying down the street, right? Traveling smooth, traveling graceful, flying. Felt like I was flying above the crowds for the first time, bobbing and weaving amongst the people. So anyways, we just knit another 3 rounds together. Yeah, this is the granita tank top. We just did 3 more rounds in stockinette stitch. So if you've watched my previous videos on this, we just did another 3/8 inch. Yes, right? And guess what? Look at this is the body of the tank top. That is I got 1 more round of stockinette stitch left to go in this tank top. And then I'm moving on to the lace portion, right? You can see in the picture, there's lace at the top of that. So 1 more round of stockinette, and then we'll move on to the lace, which means you won't see me working on a Whip Wednesday again, because I'm going to have to go and review each lace pattern and memorize it, right? Memorize it and count my yarn overs and my knit 2 together and all that kind of stuff, and make sure that I keep the lace pattern. And so I'm gonna have to focus on that. I'm gonna have to count my stitches, right? And you don't want to sit here and listen to me count. Knit 2 together, yarn over, whatever, knit 3, whatever. So that's going to take concentration. That's going to take focus. So I'm going to get off of here, and you'll see this again on a Finish It Friday. But the lace portion is definitely going to slow me down. It is. There's no doubt that I'll be working on it slower. So just like in the last videos, though, I will go ahead and hop off the bed, turn on the light, take out the tripod, and let you see the project in the light for those of you who have sight. And again, if you do have questions about guide dogs at all or my experience, feel free to ask those questions. questions, because when I had my 3 guide dogs for those 17 years, let me tell you, I got a lot of questions. Random strangers will walk up to me in the grocery store, on a date, on the bus, and just randomly be like, so how does your dog know when to cross the street? What is your dog's name? How old is your dog? Where did you get your dog? Like, I could go on and on about the random questions that strangers would ask me every single day. So I know there's a lot of questions in the world, and it is okay to ask. Alrighty. Well, but you know what I like to end with. Creativity is for everybody, right? Whether you see or you see like me, which is not in color, not in the day, or if you don't see at all, creativity is for you. Alrighty. Well, thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye for now. Okay. Put you on pause. Okay, well, here's the tank top. Like I said, we got one more round of stockinette to go, and then we are moving on to the lace. It's a blackberry color, which if you're colorblind like me, it really is a very, very dark purple. It looks black to me. It does. I'm just gonna tell you, like, I love dark purples, but this blackberry is so dark that it looks the same as the shirt I'm wearing to me, which is a black shirt. So anyways, thanks for listening, and as always, until next time, thank you and happy stitching.